Now, our first guest is one of the most powerful women in politics who's often found herself at the centre of controversial headlines. Today, though, she's here for matters much closer to her heart after the Labour Party have announced their plan to smash the class ceiling and reform education. Please welcome Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner. Hi, Angela. Thanks for joining us.
I passed the first test and didn't fall down the stairs.
That's the one that everybody worries about. Now, listen, obviously it's important to talk about education, but, I mean, would you agree that one of the major barriers to education, not the only one, but one of the major barriers, is poverty?
Absolutely.
Is that not what we should be tackling first and foremost?
Well, poverty is a part of it, and I think one of the things that we've said quite categorically is having a secure home as well. Far too many people at the moment don't have that security, so children are often moved a lot in their early childhood if they're in temporary accommodation, or people are waiting on housing lists, or they have to move because the landlord moves their property or kicks them out. So having a secure home is important. But the early years, I keep going on and on about early years because my mum couldn't read all right, and therefore, when I went into school, I wasn't what they call it school ready. I didn't know that, but I didn't look at a book before I went into school, so I was already behind my peers. And I only found out recently that I had speech and language therapy as well, apparently, when I was younger, and I didn't realise that. I'm sure some people on my Twitter feed will say that speaks for a lot now, but never mind.
We're not interested in what
No, we're not interested in that, unless they say nice things. But then that early years and that early communication skills is fundamental, I think, because once you get to... So when I got to 13, 14, I was so far behind that other things outside of the classroom were far more interesting. And I think the curriculum has become so narrow today that if you're creative as an individual or you're good at something that's not strictly academic, you kind of get pushed to do the stuff you're not good at and do more of it to try and catch up 100%. Without doing the stuff you're really good at, because we're all different.
The curriculum at the minute is almost like based on Industrial Revolution days, isn't it? And it's not really changed. So the mission statement, I think, is excellent. I agree with every single bit of it. Breakfast clubs for every primary school pupil, thousands more qualified expert teachers, etc. This is all going to cost. How are you going to pay for it?
Yeah, well, we said it would be just under £1 billion for what we said. The breakfast school clubs, we said about reforming the non-dom status. We've talked about ending the subsidy to private schools, and we've made no apology of that because, look, when I went into school, my free school meal at lunchtime was the meal that I was getting first in the day. So apologies to my teachers that tried to educate me before lunch, because all I was interested in those first couple of lessons is getting to lunchtime and knowing what I was going to eat at dinner time. So I think breakfast school clubs is incredibly important. It helps working people as well, because if you've got to get them to work, it's good to be able to drop your kids off early, but it also ensures they have a great meal to start the day. And I think on that front, it's hard unless you've been there to really truly appreciate how difficult it is to get in the classroom and learn if you're absolutely starving.
I agree, and I mean, I find that the child poverty levels in this country are terrifying, and I've been talking to the North East Child Poverty Commission, because we have it the worst in the North East, and the fact that 72% of these children in poverty are from families who are working at the moment. They can't afford baby formula, they can't afford any food at all. I think, though, and so therefore, you know, of course, we need to see that change before anything else. But as a Labour supporter all of my life, when I started to feel more politically homeless was during the pandemic, because I didn't feel that there was enough opposition to the government, that there was enough opposition from Labour to try and get the children back into school, because now we're finding people who take the kids out of school for one day, you know, instead of a holiday. And yet, to me, there was so much evidence that children were not benefiting, and yet Labour did not seem to fight. And I felt that we would have been in lockdown longer and the children would have been out of school longer. Did you all agree totally with what the government were doing? Because I never saw any pushback.
No, we were pushing really hard, because what we were trying to get, and the information we were getting from the experts, is actually if we would have acted more decisively earlier on, then we would have prevented greater lockdowns and longer lockdowns, because the important thing was following the medical advice. And it was really scary. I've got a child who was born at 23 weeks who's vulnerable, Yeah, he had, I've got one with asthma and one who had a collapsed lung and was on a ventilator for months. So as a mother myself, when I was Shadow Education Secretary at the time, I remember being really panicked and conflicted about even in my own personal circumstances about, is my child safe to go into school or not?
I think in the first lockdown, yes, but and obviously yours is an exceptional case there, but by the second and the third
But I think all
lockdowns...
parents felt like that at the time. Everyone was like, well,
but I think there was enough evidence then to say that
But Angela, for a whole host of reasons, people are cynical about politics. You know, and you will hear people saying, we've said it, you know, they're all the same, they promise you the world and they never deliver. And, you know, we've said here what you are suggesting for education. Yeah, who's going to argue with that? But how can people have any faith that you're going to deliver?
Well, we've been really clear on what we can and can't do. So, for example, one of the things that we're really pushed on is free school meals across the board at lunchtime, but we can't deliver that yet. We haven't got the funds to do it. So we've prioritised giving children breakfast clubs and paying for that. So there is things we'd really like to do that we're not able to do. People talk about tuition fees at the moment. Yes, we can look at how people pay it back.
But Keir Starmer flipped on that, didn't he?
Well, no, he said that the economy has been crashed and there isn't money to do that. So it's about priorities, and we've been very clear on what we can deliver and making sure we do that, because that trust in confidence and in politics.
Who would be your dream shadow cabinet?
Well, I definitely have you lot in there.
You're in trouble.
Tiger mums are the best shadow cabinet you can get.
Can we ask you about the curriculum? You wanted to ask something about the curriculum, didn't you, Brenda?
Doing some research for a trust that I'm working on, which is to do with exploring young people's creativity and just helping them to grow. So has anybody spoken to the children? Because in my research, most of the children says nobody cares because they're not listening to us, and we're the ones that have got the voice. We want to study this, but we're learning about history that actually isn't the real history, rather than the day-to-day of how to manage your finances, how to, you know, just negotiate life and life skills, and giving them those basic cognitive skills. Has anybody actually... Is that part of the plan, to speak to the children who are actually affected by this?
Absolutely, and I get trolled by my teenagers all the time. In fact, one of them wanted to do 2 subjects that he weren't able to do, that he's really good at, because they weren't able to offer him to do both. He had to pick either history or geography. He wanted to do both of those because they're his good subjects, and he was told no.
And is it one or the other? There's evidence there. If the children get bored of what they're being, then they'll find something else to do.
What I want us to be able to do, and we've said about curriculum reform, is like kids are good at something. All children are good at something. And if the curriculum's so narrow that you push down a particular route, and it's even worse now. So one of my children has a problem. It's like dyslexia in maths. He's not very good at it. It's not his great subject. He wants to learn functional maths, and I've put him on that pathway. But they're pushing him to GCSE maths and to do maths that he's not going to be able to do. And they give him extra... They take him out the stuff he's really good at and push him into the bit that he's not good at, and then and he's 15 now. Luckily, he's not one like me that would be bolshy and say no. But if you've got a child that at that age who's been told you're going to do loads of stuff you're not good at, but we're not going to lean into the stuff you are good at, then I don't know personally how you keep a child in school at that age, because they'll get disconnect immediately from it. So I want to see a curriculum reform where we can learn the basics, we can put people on academic routes, absolutely, but we can also appreciate vocational and creative routes as well, so that the children can get this rounded and feel emotionally connected to who they are.
Everything you're talking about there, I'm just listening to you thinking you're spinning a lot of plates. You're talking about your kids there and their various issues and what they're dealing with and what you're dealing with in a day-to-day basis. You're very high up, obviously, in the Labour Party. So I want to ask you, first of all, about women in politics, because it's a very hard job to do if you're a woman, I think. And secondly, so let's do fantasy world. So Keir Starmer steps down tomorrow, wants to spend more time with his family or whatever. Do you want the top job? Yes or no?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, because there is a lot of pressure and I sacrifice a lot. Like, I've just talked about my children. I've sacrificed a lot. I mean, I'm not the first person the school calls when there's a problem at school, because they know that I'm not there.
Right.
And that's quite hard. And
so would it be worse if you were leader?
Absolutely it would. Yeah. And I think it goes on to the broader culture of politics, this 24/7, and it goes to our staff as well. I feel like a poor employer at times, because of the culture of Parliament and politics, is my staff are 24/7, even when I try and tell them to put it away, because of the culture. So I'd like to see a broader culture, because then I think you get more women coming into politics, and you get more dads spending more time with their family. So I'd like to see the men push back on it more as well. Rishi Sunak's a dad, he's got young kids. In fact, my conversation with Rishi was about whether his 10-year-old's at the right age for a mobile phone or not. So, you know, I'd like us to be showing that we're parents and that we've got families outside of work as well.
But surely if you're doing the deputy job, you must want to do the top job at some point.
I do want a woman to be there, and I think collectively, I've said this publicly and I'll say it again, when Keir does stand down, then I do want a woman. So whether it's me or whether I push another woman forward, the one thing...
What difference do you think that would make?
Because I think having women in positions of power does make a difference. Having diversity is... So I've pushed really hard as deputy leader to increase diversity in the Labour Party, not because I just want to tick a box and say, isn't it wonderful how we've got all these women or all these people from ethnic minority backgrounds, but actually, the more diverse we are, the more depth we have to policy-making decisions, because you've got people that have got real-life experience, so they bring things to the table.
Do you think that would help with what is always talked about with the toxic culture within Westminster as well? Do you think that having a woman in the top job in Labour would go some way to... I mean, do you agree with that toxic culture in Westminster?
I think there is a toxic culture in Westminster. I know Myra Black has recently said that she's going to stand down as a result of it, and I could...
Oh, it's not just that, though, is it?
But I could relate to a lot of what she was saying. She talked about panic buttons at her house. She talks about the damaging culture and the way in which the Westminster operates. I do think it needs to be broken down, and I do think a lot of work is being done towards that.
Yeah.
And, you know, as Myra said, she's carried that baton for a while, but it's on all of us to do that. And I
do you think she'd make a good Labour leader?
Yeah. Angela, thank you. We are out of time, but thank you very much for joining us today.